Good afternoon. Well, I thought after finishing my lunch, I was preparing to go out, and then Anis helped me and he told me that I have to give a short speech and not to make it long. Well, thanks for the AmCham. This is my second speech. My first one was in Washington a few weeks ago, and this is the second time I meet with such distinguished gathering in Cairo. What caught my eyes is, I don't see the title here, but there was on the invitation a title for this speech, Raising Revenues, Attracting Investments, and this was the government dilemma. And I will stop here for a little while. First, there is nothing that belongs to the government alone. If it's a dilemma for everybody, not us alone. Two, I don't take it as a dilemma, I take it as the opportunity to move forward. Yes, it is difficult, we know the challenges, we know the nature of those challenges, but we also, and I want to assure you that we know the true and real solutions for those challenges. And we're up to it, and we're determined to take whatever it takes, regardless of its political price. But we're determined to rebuild Egypt, put it on the right track, and make a good takeoff for this huge economy. Some issues will take longer than others, and we have to bear together. But there is also a burden, a huge burden, and that burden has to be shared by everybody except the poor, and only the poor will be protected. But everybody has got to share part of that burden, and we expect that that burden sharing will come voluntarily, not by a government push, but from a feeling of people who are responsible and who know the opportunities of this country. And they are great. Again, no dilemmas, because everything will depend on the policy content, policy composition, and the policy design. And we are making sure that there is a balance between the economic, financial, social, and political aspects. But also, we are very keen to make everybody understand that this is not going to be a journey, not going to be something to enjoy, but we're going to have some tough times, some bumpy stages. But what I can assure you, that we are heading in the right direction for better Egypt. What we need to do is to make sure that we are rebuilding confidence. Rebuilding the confidence of investors, confidence of the Egyptian people, confidence of the consumers, of the suppliers, confidence of even the institutions, the government institutions. This is not easy, but will require from us to do the right signals. We have started already. We are keen to continue and finish our political mandates as they are mandated in the Constitution. We have a Constitution. Next week we're having the presidential elections, and a few months after, by late autumn or early winter, we will be having the parliamentary elections. This is not sufficient to regain the confidence, and we know this. But let me remind you, a few years ago, we missed a lot of notches on our sovereign rating on the backdrop of the political transition. This continued all the way during 2011 and until the first quarter of 2012. If you go back and review the sovereign rating reports, you'll find them primarily citing the political situation that made us lose points on our economic rating. So political reform is key reform. But we're also aware that we have a big and strong homework to do on the economic side. Restoration of macroeconomic imbalances is a priority. And I repeat, again and again and again, it has a price, and we will all have to share the burden. These are, by the way, good news, nothing to make you worried. But we also have a great opportunity to grow, because we have been growing way below potential for 3 years. And any little movement will give you the opportunity and the window to grow fast and with least effort. In the fiscal policy, and I have said this several times in the media, I have a very limited fiscal space to maneuver. And accordingly, I will have to work on the least sufficient spending items and the biggest tickets I have on the budget to reprioritize my spending envelope towards better spending on social aspects, and also to control my budget deficit, which if we do not do anything about it this year, the next year, it's going to touch 14% of GDP. This is huge, and we will not let this happen. Again, we will not let this happen. This year's budget deficit, if we exclude the generous support that we have received from the Gulf countries, and I take just the structural deficit, that is going to have a deficit reading of 14.8 to 15% of GDP. With the generous support we have received, I'm expecting a deficit between 11.5% of GDP by end of this year. I'm working very hard with my colleagues in the cabinet to structure a package in order to maintain the deficit, structural deficit, for next year at below 11%. Again and again and again, this will require everybody to share part of the burden. Tax buoyancy. It is very unfortunate that I see many accountants here in the room, but it's very unfortunate when you look into the tax rate, the tax collections as a percent of GDP in Egypt. If I exclude the sovereign entities, i.e. the central bank, the Suez Canal, and the petroleum, this will come down to only 8% of GDP. There is no country can sustain this. And my target is to improve the tax buoyancy, increase the tax revenues as a percent of GDP as much as possible by avoiding building any vertical burden on the tax community, which is already thin and already exhausted by the slow growth, but rather to broaden the tax base to capture those type of incomes and those type of activities that do not address the poor by any means. And in the meantime, I'm pushing very hard on the tax authority to contain the tax evasion and to keep an eye on the tax avoidance practices that we're having. This will require the help of many of you who are expertise on this, to volunteer and to train my staff on saving Egypt's and the community's resources. Another main dimension which I'm working on is Treasury Management. I have around £4 trillion floating every year between debts, expenditures, revenues, clearances. I have around £4 trillion. That requires a different type of management for the Treasury. We cannot continue managing the way it is. It's now becoming a very burdensome on the country and the economy. Promoting growth. And this is probably the most important thing for the Egyptian people and for you also as investors here. We started, the previous government, headed by Dr. Biblawi, they proposed 2 stimulus packages. These were generous stimulus packages to be implemented by the public sector in the first place, in many sectors, infrastructure, housing, you name it, services. What we are targeting now in this government is to have pointed type of stimulus packages. And we're citing the most promising sectors in the economy. These are the telecommunications, tourism, housing, and manufacturing. And we will be pushing those sectors by demand-driven stimulus packages that stimulate the activities of the private sector. So it is conceptually different, and I'm sure we'll have quicker results than the investments that we do as a government. We also have PPP projects, and already we had the High Committee of the PPP that was headed by the Prime Minister a few weeks ago, and they approved 3 big projects in telecommunications, in syndications, and a third one that was In the river transportation, we have a forthcoming big project in river freight, and we will present it with a big industrial zone and a port in the next committee when it's held. Also, one main policy that does not only help the budget to overcome part of the big deficit that it is incurred by is the energy subsidies. Phasing out energy subsidies on different fronts. Pricing is only one front, but also controlling quantities that are sold at a subsidy is another front. Reducing and moving to more efficient energy usages in the government sector as the biggest consumer in the country is a third front. Making sure that we have sufficient diversity of the sources of energy in Egypt is also another front to help control the huge bill of energy subsidies. This will have an implication on the capital allocations, and we will not have any more distorted capital allocations in energy-intensive industries on the backdrop of huge energy subsidies. But rather, we will have the value capital that we're hopeful. We see Egypt as a hub for the high-tech industries once these distortions are removed. And these are, by definition, are labor-intensive. Using or increasing the efficiency of management of our productive assets. And you have heard probably on the media that we've been talking about a high commission to manage the publicly owned companies. This is only one step. The bigger step is to include the economic authorities as well, maybe after corporatization of those. These are having huge assets, huge opportunities, and are, for me, I see them as a big opportunity to turn from a burden on the economy to a big supporter to the economic activity and growth, and employment as well. Better management of public utilities. Well, I tell you a secret, despite all the cameras that I see and the media everywhere. I give very hard time spending money. I'm not an easy spender. Before people can get my check, I need always ask to see their reform plans in managing their utilities and in managing their sectors. That does not leave me with too many friends, but at least leave me with ضمير مستريح, and I go have sleep if I ever get it. Energy deficit. As an economist, I see it one of the big challenges that is facing this country. Yes, we have an energy deficit, and the reforms of the subsidies is a big element to try to close part of that deficit. The diversification of the sources of energy, whether it is the coal, whether it's the solar energy, wind energy, whatever it is, these diversifications will help us to close that deficit. As I mentioned at the beginning of my speech, that bear with us because some solutions will take time, more time than others. We're ready to launch all the reforms that are needed to do whatever it needs to be taken, but some measures will have to get you with some patience on us. A commitment. We're going to reform. And again, I remind you every minute, everybody will share part of the burden. But I also commit to do everything in the conventional way. No surprises. We will not tailor any solutions. We will not invent the wheel. Whatever is a conventional practice and best practices worldwide, as we believe that they are the best practices, we will implement them here. So the commitment that we will do the reforms the right way. We have few signs that are positive. The CDS has come down or been slashed by more than 1/2 over the past few months. Just the last reading is now south of 400 basis points. That went north 800 basis points a few months ago. So this is a sign of how the markets are reading the future of Egypt. And I want you to keep an eye on the future of Egypt, because this is your opportunity. Stock exchange, it's doing fine. I'll be more comfortable when they do fine on the backdrop of strong, solid economic foundations. And this is what we're building, because this will give the more sustainability and profitability over the medium and long term. There are also signs of Egypt credit rating being improving. The last report came out by S&P. They kept our rating unchanged, but the report, the tone is very positive. And we also gained or moved from a negative to a neutral sign in another report a few weeks ago. I will conclude by saying that this is a time of opportunity. So catch it. Don't let go. Thank you very much.